Do you ever feel violent?
Yes, I do.
What do you feel like doing?
Killing people.
You still feel like killing people?
Yes.
You murdered your own son?
Yes, I did.
Why did you do that?
He was a sacrifice. I was to murder 3 million people on planet Earth.
The story of the phoenix paints a picture of a circle. The ancient Greeks and Egyptians believed that the phoenix lived for 500 years, and there could only be one phoenix alive at a time. At the end of its time, the phoenix would build a nest and set itself on fire. Out of its own charred remains and ashes, a new phoenix would rise up. For many years, the phoenix has been used as a symbol of renewal and rebirth, with the fire representing anything that makes a subject stronger. But what happens when the fire in question is a life of violence? What are the results? The answer is clear in the life of Joseph Kallinger, aka the Shoemaker. Welcome to Twisted Minds. My name is James, and today we take a deep dive into what happens when evil meets a violent past to create a bloody and despicable future. Hold on to your hats because there's nothing good in this story. The early years often shape an individual into the adult they will eventually become. It's a period where our core personalities, preferences, and who we are get formed. Some of it may change as time goes by, but who we are and what we do as adults usually depends on what experiences we have as children. For Joseph Kallinger, there was nothing remarkable about his childhood. He was born at the Northern Liberty Hospital in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on the 11th of December, 1935 as Joseph Lee Brenner III to his father, Joseph Lee Brenner Jr., and his mother, Judith Lee Brenner. However, almost 2 years later in December 1937, Joseph was given up for adoption and placed in foster care following his father leaving his mother. She made sure to visit him once a week, but that only created separation anxiety for the young child. Joseph didn't have to spend too long in the system and was adopted by Anna and Stephen Kallinger, an Austrian immigrant couple on October 15, 1939. But this wasn't going to be some Disney tale where Joe would be accepted into a family that just wanted to love and care for him. Instead, it would become the beginning of a nightmare that would leave so much destruction, even many years later. Despite the fact that they were supposed to provide care for the boy, the Kallingers were abusive toward Joseph, so badly that when he was 6, Stephen Kallinger inflicted a hernia on the young child. That was just a glimpse into the suffering Joseph faced at the hands of his adoptive parents. Joseph faced a wide array of severe punishment from Stephen and Anna Kallinger throughout his childhood. Sometimes he would be beat with a hammer on the head for seemingly trivial issues, like when he asked his mother if he could go on a field trip to the zoo. They would burn him with hot irons and flog him with various items, including belts and brooms. At other times, his adoptive parents would make him kneel on jagged rocks or lock him in closets. They would also feed him feces. Things weren't any better outside of the Kallinger home as Joseph was taken sexual advantage of at knife point by a group of older neighborhood boys in 1944 when he was just 9 years old. It's no surprise then that Joseph was very rebellious and considered a truant by his parents and teachers. However, the kid still had dreams of his own. Joseph had always wanted to become a playwright and took great joy in acting on stage, especially when, in the 9th grade, he played the part of Ebenezer Scrooge in A Christmas Carol for the town's YWCA. It's hard though to focus and succeed on anything remotely normal when you've just had a childhood like that. At just 13, he already had problems sexually and would need a knife to reach orgasm while he masturbated. He would even have to stab pictures of naked men and women to become aroused, and sometimes made holes in the walls to masturbate. When he turned 15, Joseph began a sexual relationship with a schoolmate, Hilda Bergman. They had met at a local theater he visited on Sundays. His adoptive parents were very much against this relationship, but Joseph never took to their warnings. Sometime in his adolescence, Joseph heard voices telling him God wanted him to heal and save people through their feet. Around the same time, he moved out of his parents' house and got a place of his own, but he continued to work as a cobbler at his father's shop. This was perhaps the first point in Joseph's life that he had a meaningful association with other people. He then went on to marry Hilda at 17, and the two would have children together. This attempt at a family, however, would not last the test of time, and Hilda would leave Joseph when he was 20. thanks to domestic violence and abuse he dished out to her. Joseph didn't take their separation well and had to be admitted to St. Mary's Hospital on September 4th, 1957, where medical staff treated him for headaches and appetite loss. The medical staff cited the stress from the divorce as the cause of his ailments. About a year later, Joseph Kallinger was released from hospital care and seemed to move on. He gave marriage a second shot on April 20th, 1958. His second marriage produced 5 children. However, history repeated itself when it came to his family life. He was extremely abusive toward his wife and children, and on many occasions, he would replicate the evil punishments his foster parents had given him with his family. His health was no better, and Joseph Kallinger would spend much of the next decade as a regular visitor at many mental institutions. He was admitted for a range of issues, from attempting suicide to amnesia. He also set his house on fire 3 times. First for amusement, which earned him about $1,600 in insurance claims, and then 2 other times which led to his hospitalization. Somehow though, the troubles were just beginning. Nothing could have prepared anyone for what was to come next with Joseph Kallinger. Joe's hospitalizations did nothing to help his abuse toward his children. In fact, it only seemed to get worse. By 1972, 6 of his children were living under his roof, 2 of them from his marriage with Hilda. In January of that year, he branded one of his daughters on the thigh with a hot iron when she tried to run away from home. This and further incidents prompted his children to contact the police, and Joseph Kallinger was arrested for child abuse. During his incarceration, a psych evaluation revealed that he had an IQ of 82 and suffered from paranoid schizophrenia. The state psychiatrists recommended that he be placed under supervision with his family. His children would eventually recant their allegations that their father abused them. In the next 2 years, things would seemingly quiet down regarding the Kallingers, until 1974, when all hell would let loose. Around the middle of 1974, Joseph Kallinger's hallucinations were reportedly reaching new highs. Apparently, he had a conversation with a disembodied head named Charlie, and had received divine instructions from God to murder young children and cut off their genitals. He told all of this to his son Michael, who was 13 at the time. He would later reveal in interviews after his incarceration that he had received orders to kill 3 million people. In the fall of 1974, one of his 3 children who had reported him to the police and recanted their allegations, Joseph Jr., was found dead in an old building in Philadelphia. Coincidentally, Joseph Kallinger had taken out a $45,000 insurance policy on 2 of his sons, the now dead Joe Jr. and a younger son 2 weeks earlier. Joseph told law enforcement that the boy had run away, but despite these claims, the insurance company refused to pay him. It would be found out that Joseph actually killed Joey Jr. by drowning him at a demolition site on the 28th of July, 1974, with the help of Michael. The drowning was not even their first attempt at taking Joey's life. Joseph had first tried to get the boy to fall off a cliff while claiming he was taking a photo. On the second attempt, Joseph took Michael and Joey with him on an arson trip. He attempted to trap Joey in a burning trailer. But this was not their first act of evil together. On the 7th of July, 1974, Joseph and Michael murdered a 10-year-old Puerto Rican child, Jose Colazo, torturing him first before they cut off his genitals. Just imagine being Michael, having your own father manipulate you into helping you kill your own brother and other children. Horrible. Even evil can take a road trip. In November 1974, Joseph and Michael went on a crime spree that spanned Philadelphia, Baltimore, and New Jersey. In Lindenwold, New Jersey, they broke into a home but did not find anyone there. Disappointed, they tried again and broke into a second home. And this time, Joseph took sexual advantage of the female resident. On December 3rd, 1974, they were in Susquehanna Township, Pennsylvania, where they kidnapped 4 women who were playing bridge and made away with about $20,000 worth of valuables and cash. The duo would also break into Pamela Yaska's residence in Maryland and hold her captive. At some point, Joseph Kallinger threatened her with a gun and forced her to perform sexual acts on him. Their spree of terror and vile acts would continue for 6 weeks, and on the 8th of January 1975, had moved to Leona, New Jersey, where they came across the home of Dee Dee Romaine's mother. Dee Dee had been taking care of her sick grandmother, and her young son, Robert, was with her. The rest of the family was not home. Joe and Michael Kallinger approached the house as salesmen and inquired about who was home, a question that unsettled Dee Dee. So she asked them to go away. Joseph showed her his gun and made his way into the home, where he proceeded to strip and bind the mother and son, while the Kallingers waited for the rest of the family to come back home. Randy, Dee Dee's sister, was the first to return. Joseph put a gun to her head and demanded money, with Randy giving him $5 she had. She also pointed to the box on the dresser, which contained some more money. Eventually, she was bound like the rest of the family. Soon after, Edwina, Retta, and her boyfriend Frank arrived at the house. The sinister Kallingers had no problem subduing them as well, and there were no major incidents until the grandmother's 21-year-old nurse, Maria Fashing, arrived. Kallinger assaulted Maria in the basement and at some point wanted her to bite off a bound and gagged Frank's penis, who was also in the basement, which she refused. It's not clear, but this may have been what made Joseph Kallinger so angry that he slit Maria's throat from ear to ear. Michael was watching the other hostages upstairs, but Edwina had taken the commotion as a cue to escape and get help, since she was not bound like the rest. The Kallingers knew it would only be a matter of time before law enforcement arrived and made their getaway from the house. Soon after, Sergeants Robert R. McDougall and Sergeant Henry Alston arrived at the home, where they would discover the family that had faced Joseph Kallinger's horrors. The Kallingers' getaway was not as clean as they would have liked. In their haste, Joseph had dropped a bloody shirt, which police were able to trace back to him, along with eyewitness reports that he and Michael had been spotted in the area. This would lead them to the family's history with domestic violence, the arsons, and of course, the unsolved death of Joseph Jr. It was like uncovering a box of rotting fish. On the 17th of January 1975, Joseph Kallinger and his son Michael were arrested and faced kidnapping and sexual crime charges. Joseph eventually faced charges for killing Joey Jr., Maria Fashing, and Jose Colazo, the neighborhood kid. Kallinger pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity and claimed that it was God that ordered him to kill people. The courts weren't buying it, and in August 1975, the state psychiatrist evaluation found him sane. Michael, on the other hand, was regarded as a delinquent, but the courts agreed that he was under the influence and could still change. The murder charges against him were dropped, and he pleaded guilty to 2 counts of robbery. He was sentenced to a reformatory, and he was released at 21. He left the state and changed his name. Joseph Kallinger had 2 trials, the first ending with a hung jury at a mistrial. The second trial was more decisive, and on October 14, 1976, he was sentenced to life in prison. While he began his prison sentence, Kallinger started acting out, drawing attention to himself. He would have violent outbursts from time to time. On one occasion, in March 1977, he set himself on fire. In April of that same year, he assaulted a fellow inmate and started a fire in his cell block. He had many other incidences, prompting the state to move him to a mental hospital in Trenton, New Jersey. He would later be transferred to another mental hospital in Philadelphia on May 18, 1979. Joseph Kallinger's evil did not end when he was incarcerated. Even under watchful eyes, he still attempted to take lives. In one instance, he described in an interview, he said, "I was hallucinating. I took a razor and cut a man's throat in the hospital." He also revealed that his instructions from God were to kill 3 million people, and his son, Joey Jr., was a test or sacrifice to show that he could follow those orders. He believed that after following those orders, he was supposed to kill his family, take his own life, and become God. From 1991 to 1996, he would spend most of his prison sentence in solitary confinement or on suicide watch. He finally passed away on March 26, 1996, after dying from a seizure. He was 59. Joseph Kallinger had a troubled beginning, and while we may never know if his claims of hearing voices and hallucinating are true, one thing we can agree on is that he had an evil, twisted mind. Thanks for tuning in to Twisted Minds. That was the case of Joseph Kallinger, and why don't you go ahead and click on one of the 2 videos on your screen for another one of our videos.